You're listening to The Coaching Divas, a podcast for everyone navigating the twists and turns of corporate life.
Follow along as we chat through common workplace situations and extend the coach approach to help you handle them with ease.
We offer a cross-sectional view that spans generations, positions, workplaces, and lifestyles.
We're your hosts,
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, and we are
The Coaching Divas.
Whether you're leading a small team or managing an entire department, performance reviews are a critical part of your role. They can be a powerful tool for growth, motivation, and alignment, but only if they're done right. In this episode, we'll break down how to approach performance reviews with confidence, clarity, and compassion. We'll also explore best practices, common pitfalls, and ways to ensure that your feedback is constructive, fair, and truly supports your team's development. So let's get started.
What have we learned as leaders when it comes to performance management?
It's hard.
I'll share one word. It's hard. I need to lean into empathy, even though I may not be happy with them at all.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we're a little bit consistent and actually complete performance reviews on a regularly scheduled basis.
Ooh, let's dive into that one a bit more. What do you mean, Claudia?
That's something I've run into. Some organizations, when they bring on a new employee, they says, oh, yes, we care very much about our employees. We have a set schedule about performance improvement, training opportunities, career growth, et cetera, et cetera. Yet, if you're not meeting with someone on a regular basis as to what their ambitions are and how it aligns with the company's ambitions, what good is it, right? So you need to have a bit of a schedule, be consistent, and make sure you follow through on it, because people will get discouraged and go elsewhere. I have worked for organizations where they have all this, I'll call it lip service, just because I couldn't think of another word, and people don't know where they stand in their career. And I think it's really important to make sure that if you are going to do all these things and, do it, as you said, to deal with empathy, and Misha, it is hard. There's no question about it, but we need to make sure that as a management team, you actually follow through on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you guys experienced?
Well, I can say this much as a people manager. One of the things I've really struggled with is finding the time. HR says you need to follow this. It is part of our yearly cycle. We go through the conversations. Everyone sets their objectives, but it is a time crunch. And I think as a manager, I've had to introduce a real discipline around it and really say, this is important for my team, and stick to it. And that includes things like putting the checkpoints in the calendar and making sure that I show up. It doesn't matter what else is going on. Yes, the roof may be burning, but I need to make the time that at least once a quarter to go in and tell my people and have the conversation of how do they think they're doing and what have I seen?
When we talk about time, there's so many elements of time to a manager when it comes to performance reviews. One, make sure you're making the time to write a constructive and impactful, valuable performance review. Don't just make it super vague, because that comes across. But also, have you scheduled enough time to talk to somebody about their performance review? Or are you only scheduling 15 minutes and hoping for you to just deliver and then that's it? There's nothing for the individual to have a conversation with you about. And then time throughout the year. I think it's interesting because I remember doing performance reviews and I went through different techniques to figure out what worked best for me. So sometimes I would write all my performance reviews like overnight. I would pull almost like an all-nighter. I'd go to sleep for maybe 3 hours because I would be locked in the mindset. I can think about all my people and just iron all these performance reviews out. As you get older, pulling an all-nighter is harder and harder. So then it became, okay, maybe like for, a week span or 2 week span, I'm, sectioning off an hour and a half every single day to write someone's review. But it's being thoughtful from a time perspective as well. When you're a manager, don't just leave it to the last minute. Don't see it as a task that's on the side of your desk that you just, it's once a year. I just got to get this done. Like, nah. It's like, oh, no. This is an important time of the year. I should be investing the time that replicates that importance. And then the other piece to it too is And I like what Daniela shared of like, what cadence are you giving yourself throughout the year to talk about performance with your team members? Because a performance review is a point in time, but performance happens throughout the year. So as a leader, as a people leader, are you making the time to talk about it throughout the year so that your folks aren't caught off guard? They're not surprised by their performance review. I remember in my last organization, we were actually trained as managers, people leaders that said, if anyone on your team, if they are surprised and caught off guard in a performance review, you failed as a leader.
That's an excellent point.
And so
That's huge.
it's that time. Where are you investing the time throughout the year for performance, evaluations, reviews, constructive feedback, all that, not just the point of time of when the review is documented.
So what I'm hearing is that you're saying that informal reviews, informal feedback, comments, attaboys, or maybe we could have done that differently, check-ins. They're just as valuable as that formal sit-down.
Absolutely.
Where everything's on a piece of paper and you sign off on it and agree. Very powerful. Really powerful.
And I think what I'm also kind of cycling back is your one-on-ones. It shouldn't just be a status update. Here's the work I'm going to give you. Where are you with my projects?
Mm-hmm.
Why not take that opportunity to say, hey, in your performance review, you talked about stepping to this type of training.
Mm-hmm.
What have you done about it? Right?
Yeah.
Like set your one-on-ones to go beyond just, I'll call it the mundane tasks that you need them to complete so that you as a manager can check off my boxes on my performance review.
Yeah. In past organizations I've worked in, one of the common things that we would kind of ask ourselves as managers when we're writing performance reviews is the what and the how. So what has someone done, but how have they done it as well? What always referred back to their goals. So what were we goaled as a team or them as an individual, and how are they tracking towards that? The how is not so much like, how are you tracking towards it? You're either like doing well or not. It's actually, how are you showing up? So how are you embodying our culture? Are you like crushing all your goals, but you're extremely difficult to work with? That's actually not going to get you a favorable rating, because your what is great, but your how isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that balance also plays out throughout the year as a manager who's keeping their team accountable, is saying, okay, what's happening with these goals? Where are we at? And as you're doing that, you can also be giving them feedback if how they're doing it, how they're showing up, isn't in line with an organization's or your expectations.
Yeah.
It's almost a quantity versus quality kind of discussion as well, right? I mean, I know quantity, tends to be more numeric, but quantity is, are you getting what was expected of you done? As you said, Misha, but it's the how. How are you doing it? Because if no one else wants to work with you, it doesn't matter what you get done. Because as we've spoken in the past, it's all about being in the village. It's all about the community. It's all about, being able to work with your coworkers. Because nobody wants to work with the me, I got to get this done, but I'm ticking off everybody along the way to get it done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the idea of the supportive environment.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
How am I, as a manager, creating an environment where employees can feel safe?
Yeah.
To discuss their challenges and ask for help.
Yeah.
There's also a layer to there of, in my mind, about cultural sensitivity. What am I doing as a manager to ensure that I'm understanding diversity and inclusive leadership? Am I creating that space so that someone can feel like they can actually contribute to their fullest potential?
Expand on that.
Well, I think there is, if you think about environments today, right? It's a much more diverse organization. Someone that's more vocal may not be culturally comfortable.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I think as a manager, we need to be culturally sensitive to who we're giving feedback to. There will be differences in how I say something, will be different in how it lands for the individual. And yes, that's common with a lot of different things, but in particular with performance reviews, the words I use, I want to be aware of how they land for somebody and what they mean to that person. So I want to create a space as a manager where I am recognizing their concerns as I'm giving that feedback. So aside from regular feedback, there's also the idea of consistency in using words that they feel comfortable with.
I think tone also comes into play because there are some people with their backgrounds, they need a more direct tone. This is how we do things. And then there are other people, the way they were raised and culturally how the things come across, they need more of a gentler push. So you have to know who you're speaking to and when it is. And I had an experience myself where I had myself being a female, I had a male teammate, and he and I worked out really well. But there was one time, probably as we were getting a bit more comfortable toward near the end of a performance review, and he made the comment to me that he really enjoys working with me and he has a lot of respect for me, which I really appreciated. But then he also added the bit of the comment, it doesn't matter what the rest of my community thinks. And I think there was some prejudices, I'll use that word, about him being a male reporting up into a female. So I thought that was actually quite interesting. It didn't seem to hamper our relationship any, but he was getting some teasing amongst his family and friends about having to report to a woman. It was something I never even considered, but it was something he was dealing with at times. So you never know what's going on with the other person behind the scenes or in their other lives outside of the manager teammate environment. So it's quite interesting what you can come across.
You just sparked a memory for me. I was the manager and I had a teammate that I had to give feedback to. He was very opposed to it.
Mm.
And he a lot of times didn't like it when I asked him to deliver something or execute on something. It was a difficult conversation for me. I will be totally frank. I think I was still learning how to be a manager and what my management style was in that moment. It was also tricky because the feedback I was trying to give, I wasn't his direct manager. It was a project manager relationship. But even then, he wasn't delivering within the timelines that we needed him to. And I was also trying to address some cultural differences that were showing up in how he spoke to some of the other team members. And to this day, I'm just going to be fully transparent. I don't know if my fear of that has changed, because that's hard. That's a really tricky one.
What do you mean by fear?
Well, I shared with him the feedback, and I said, "What can we do differently to make you successful in delivery?" And the response was, "Why are you even picking on me?"
Oh, dear.
Right? Like, it was very confrontational. It was right up front to kind of establish. And, obviously, you're going to have conversations with other people who've worked with this individual, because we'll go back to the gossip conversation. Everyone has an experience. And for me, it was challenging because I've looked at myself as always trying to create a collaborative environment. And when I give feedback, and to me, that was a piece of performance feedback because we're missing due deadlines. Mm-hmm. So something's going on. And as a PM, for those that don't know, you're evaluated across the board by your success in delivery. And that's what matters.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, there was a bit of a fear of like, why am I not able to bring this individual along with everybody else? People had all kinds of different theories. He's just a grumpy old man. He's chauvinistic. He's misogynistic. He's blah, 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 blah. Like, there's all these isms that came up. But now as I think about the cultural sensitivity, sometimes it can be really hard when you hit that rock. And it's just not going to be well received. So I had to learn to deal through that difficult situation. And I did seek counsel from other managers. I even sought counsel from my own manager once removed on the topic. Not much help was given. I'll be totally frank.
And how did that relationship end up?
Well, I mean, the project went on for another 6 months. We continued through that rocky stage, managed to deliver.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was the rest of the team, we kind of worked around him, which isn't a good experience when it comes to performance review either. That's a great example where sometimes a performance review that you may give to someone as a manager isn't going to land and isn't going to make any difference.
Yeah.
And it's messy.
Just goes to show that there isn't always a good solution.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just have to kind of go weave your way around the problem and move on.
Mm-hmm. The idea of adaptability comes up.
Yeah.
I think there's an element in there, though, that as a manager, it's the notion of not to take it personally. So if you're delivering constructive feedback, you're discussing an area of opportunity, an area of improvement for someone, and that's rooted in your experience, your understanding of their roles and responsibilities, your expectations for the individual that have hopefully been clearly communicated to them. That is where your evaluation is coming from. And so I think when you have a recipient to that feedback who is defensive, aggressive, doesn't want to accept what you're saying, it's a reminder to not take it personally. I used to talk to the managers about this all the time. Try your hardest not to double down and repeat yourself and say, well, this is what we talked about. And, well, don't you remember when I said this? And, if we go back a couple of months, because now you're adding fuel to the fire. It's almost patronizing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, sit there, hold the silence for them. Listen to what they have to say. Let them get it all off their chest and use your better judgment of whether or not you think this person is capable of having a progressive, forward-moving conversation from this point onward. If your judgment says, nope, I'm just going to be met with a brick wall, pin it.
Mm-hmm.
Pin it. Let them say everything they need to after you've delivered the feedback. And thank you. Thank you for telling me what's on your mind. I think it's best we put a pin in this conversation. Let's sleep on it and regroup in a couple of days to figure out how we move forward from here. However, the result of your performance review is not going to change. And that's it. You call it. Do not double down and get defensive and try to prove yourself and justify, okay, but this is why I gave you this review. Because then I think it's just two people hitting a wall together.
How did you build the confidence
to do that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great question. I think I personally built it from the perspective of really believing, like, Misha, you're not doing this to tear somebody down. You're not doing this to, pick on someone. If I were to use that language that, that guy gave you, you're doing your job. And sometimes my job is not going to be well received by everybody.
Yeah.
And so it was almost resting myself and anchoring myself in that mindset and that notion of like, okay, am I being true to myself? Right? Am I being fair? Do the gut check. Am I being fair? Am I being objective? Would I give this feedback to anybody else, or am I picking on this individual? And when I clear that gut check, it's like, okay, I'm speaking from a place of experience. I am speaking from a place of responsibility, because it is my responsibility to be able to provide these things to an individual. And then it's just leaning into it. And I think that's also where sometimes my brain can get a little black and white, because then I'll just say to myself, like, I'm doing my job. Like, not everyone's going to like me when I'm doing my job.
It almost sounds to me like you're giving up on that person, though.
No, absolutely not. There's a follow-up conversation to be had. Right? But I'm respecting the fact that in the moment, they are not in a place to have a constructive conversation. They're in a place to have an argument. And so what I'm going to do is not engage in that argument, because that's when it becomes a conflict. And so for me, it's, okay, listen, I hear what you're saying. I also need time to digest your perspective. Unfortunately, it's not going to change the result of your performance review, because it never does. And so let's both take time back. So when I say let's put a pin in it and regroup, I'm not saying you sleep on it only. I'm sleeping on it too. And then we're going to come back together to figure out, okay, how do we move forward from this? How do we make sure you're in a good place? And I am too. Because at the end of the day, I am still responsible for managing you. So if you're not in a good place, but I just keep like drilling in, that's not effective. I haven't done my job of getting to know you and understanding how to effectively support you. And so it's definitely not like I'm giving up on someone. It's more, let me respect our space so we don't continue down a path where we're going to start saying things we will regret, so that we can come back a little bit more level-headed. And I'll share the review. I'll say, read through it. I encourage you to read through it. If you need more than a couple of days, let me know. We can circle back next week. And then it's all, but I will always circle back with you. And when I'm circling back with you, I'm not just re-drilling in all my points. It'll start with, okay, so now that we've both had time and space, help me understand what's changed for you. And I let them go first, because I'm not about to put them on the defense again.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's a very mature and confident building approach. What I also like about it, as you share that, there is this onus on the person that's received the feedback to reflect. And if they really care about the relationship and the job, maybe they'll come back and say, well, I was really annoyed because you didn't tell me this sooner. So as a manager, I get also feedback to change my style. Now, obviously, I think what I do want to preface all of this by saying is it's a relationship and it's a journey. You may not get that right out of the gate, or as a manager, I may be dealing with other people's traumas from other really bad managers that come up for them, or they don't like to be criticized, or they view it as criticism and not feedback, right? For whatever it is that's going on for them. I think there's a lot of baggage that people are carrying with them that come forward to me as a manager.
Which is also where I think as managers, we need to be mindful of the words we use. Words matter. If you were to say, I received some negative reviews, immediately that's going to put somebody on the defensive. If you say, okay, let's review your weaknesses or your poor performance, again, trigger words. I'd say, reframe it of development areas. Or what I used to do personally was I would either call it one of two things: area of opportunity or area of improvement. And my team members clearly understood the difference. Area of improvement is a need to have that is rooted in your job where there might be a gap. Area of opportunity is like a nice to have. It's an opportunity for growth, for more, to build. And so my team understood that difference, but I would never call it negative feedback. Also, when I say words matter, stay away from extreme words, like always and never. Because then someone starts to justify in their head of like, okay, but I have done this like that one time, so it can't be always. It can't be never. And so that's where it's like, even as a manager, be mindful of the words that you're using.
Yeah.
Try not to be too vague in your language when you're delivering feedback, especially if it's on the constructive side. And for me, one of the things that always helped is root yourself in facts, verifiable facts, examples, tie it to results or goals, and always expect a reaction. I think that's the other piece of like preparedness for managers. If you are a manager and you've never thought about the reaction to a performance review, you're shooting yourself in the foot right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Always expect a reaction. It can be a negative one, it could be a positive one, but always expect a reaction. And that will help you be prepared when someone does react.
Yeah. Speaking of words never to use, like never, how do you feel about when a manager will say, you're a superstar, you're a hypo, we got plans for you, all this great positive accolades. How do you think that comes across to the person who's hearing it? Like, what is the manager trying to relay when saying things like that? You're my superstar.
You're very likable.
Yes.
I really like you. I see you going far. Keep making me shine.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I'm laughing because I came from a culture that would just say that and then that's it. And this is where I would say, again, don't use vague language.
Yeah.
That is vague. Whose definition of superstar are we talking about? What is a rock star to you versus what is a rock star to me? The number one phrase that was used in my last organization: you're crushing it. Keep doing what you're doing. That is the vaguest piece of feedback anyone could ever receive.
That's bro code.
Keep doing what I'm doing. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing that's right? I don't know. And so it's interesting because I became very aware of that. And so I would still say those things, but I would quantify it right after. So I would say, if I really did not have constructive feedback for somebody, I would say, you are absolutely crushing it. Keep doing what you're doing. But more specifically, when you are doing XYZ, this is the impact that it's having. The way you show up with the team in XYZ situations, this is the stuff that's really, really mirroring that growth path that you want to get to the next level.
That's powerful, man.
And so I would quantify it. I would not just keep it vague and say, oh, yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. I would give them the recognition and say, you are crushing it.
Yeah.
Because you are. It is now a fact. And here's the evidence that backs up that fact.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think if you are a manager that does that, start validating it. Because when we talk about, so if I were to expand this one layer up and talk about generalized recognition and appreciation, this is probably the easiest way to make people feel recognized and appreciated. So instead of just saying, keep doing what you're doing, tell them what they're doing, even just one specific thing.
Yeah.
And they're going to feel seen. They're going to feel recognized and appreciated.
Because you don't want them to be empty accolades either, right? Because if your manager calls everybody a rock star, then it comes to a point of, hey, where's my rock star compliment?
Yeah.
Because they're just empty. And I love the fact you said, you kind of give them a rock, you're the rock star, keep crushing it. And I want you to keep crushing it in this manner, in this way, and give them some direction so they know where they are crushing it. And maybe then they'll determine, hey, I'm crushing it over here, but maybe I'm not crushing it over there. So it kind of helps them do a bit of self-reflection saying, oh, maybe I need to kind of work on this part a little bit over here too, because you only mentioned this part on this side here. So no, it's good. That's good.
Through all of our coach training, what's the one thing that's really stuck hard with me is how they taught us to give feedback. And I've started using that anytime I'm giving feedback. That structure of, you're amazing, blah, blah, blah. Here are your growing edges. I love that. People look at me funny going, what's a growing edge? I go, it's an area for improvement. I mean, it taps into, but that format completely has minimized the emotion in it. It is really taking a moment to talk about, here's all your success factors, and here's where let's work on it. Your growing edge is how you address people in a meeting. Here are some considerations on how you can soften that, adjust that, use a different tone, right? And it seems with the folks that I've been using it with, it has changed their perspective. I'll say it that way. Like this, it's almost like a lightening of like, I'm giving you an offer to run with something to make you more successful and more refined.
Yep. I'm aggressively shaking my head over here because I'm so glad you said offer, because the way you just describe it is, it's the difference between feeling like it's a critique versus an offering coming from a very positive, well-intentioned place.
It enforces that the manager thought about what's going on with that individual. It wasn't just a last-minute discussion. It was actually, you know what, I've been thinking about you. This is an offering I have for you. I think you'll do really great here. But again, it's not just me telling you. It's a discussion between the two, right? And coming to a conclusion together as to where they want to go. The teammate may not be aware as to what opportunities exist, right? And this is a great opportunity where you have a performance review or performance assessment, whatever you want to call it these days, and you actually say, hey, I want to do this. What's out there for me? And the manager can say, well, let me think about it, and I can come back with some offerings for you. We can decide where the heck you want to go with this. Right?
Yeah. I like the point you made that it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And the term growing edge helps people look at their own blind spots and pick which ones they want to work on.
Yeah.
Rather than being told to get to the next level, you need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? To get that exceeds, you need to. Rather, it's here are ways to show that progression or that shift.
It's funny you bring up the word exceed, because I've had many people in my department in the past say, well, how do I get an exceed? And I said, well, whatever we write on your performance, like your objectives at the beginning of the year, I want you to do more than that, because that means you're exceeding it. Because if you do this, then you're meeting it.
But that's important to tell people.
And it was so hard to convince some people, yeah, but how do I get an exceed? Do more than what we discussed, right? Do more. Yeah. And that means you're exceeding the expectations. If I say, do these things.
Which also means you always have to be doing more.
Right.
So
right.
It's the mindset as well of like, okay, so if you really want to go for an exceeding this time, as soon as you exceed and you do more, that is now your new baseline.
But it also articulates why someone will get a better performance review versus you. Even I, as an individual, as a manager, get feedback because I'm evaluated against my peers. I mean, that's just the way that we do this kind of work. Not everyone can get 100%, 110%, right? But that growing edge, I as a manager in the moment am giving you an opportunity. So 2 quarters from now, you've had an opportunity to pick what you want to exceed on or to do differently or to have that growth. I don't know. I just, that whole construct really stuck with me through coaching. And I've continued to try to use it even, with the work I do in career coaching, the volunteer work. Sometimes it's hard to tell people that their resume sucks. So I try to flip it in this way, and I see there's a complete shift in them being very, I'll use the word standoffish. But I've tried everything. Well, how about we try this perspective? A slightly different topic, but I think it's the same spirit, same kind of energy.
It sounds to me like you're trying to force them almost to take a step back and get out of the weeds and try to help them understand what is it that you're trying to say with your resume or your CV or whatever, right? And then deep dive into that. Like, what is the message you're trying to bring forward, right?
Well,
as opposed to just the task, right?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, even like now as I'm reflecting on the story I shared, but the one individual who was very pushed back and didn't want to receive any feedback, I kind of think back, you know what? I didn't show adaptability and empathy in that moment. And maybe if I had some of these words and some of these tools and tips and tricks, I could have actually, I'm going to say it this way, flip the script on him the next time I gave feedback. It isn't what could we do differently? It's, so you've succeeded in us meeting these objectives. Here's a growing edge. What can we do differently so that the estimate is better next time?
And I mean, yeah, and as managers, we're always learning and growing ourselves.
Yeah. We're always refining our leadership.
Absolutely.
Muscle.
Absolutely.
Which I think is a very good point of, as managers, we also need to embody the same type of mindset that we're looking for our team members to have. So if you're going into a performance review and you're providing feedback and your expectation is a team member is receiving that feedback, absorbing it, if they are coming back and giving you feedback, so if you're having that, defensive reaction, things like that, they're telling you, I felt so-and-so way. As a manager, we also need to replicate that behavior and be open and take time to understand it, digest it, so that there is that balance. And as Claudia said before, you can have a conversation. It's not just one person talking to another.
Thanks. Yeah. Because you have to remember too, as a manager, you have to remember, these are people's lives and careers that's in your hands. And so if you don't relay a message in a productive, constructive way, you could be really doing some damage for some people. You have to remember that. It's not just ticking a box saying, performance review is completed. It's actually, you have to remember there's a person on the other side and that your words, do matter. You certainly need to be able to convey, relay, have that discussion and make sure everyone's on the same path.
And it all ties back to your desire to create a positive work environment.
It does.
To lead by example, to stay flexible, right? I mean, you can try and create all those cultural norms and foster all of those lovely experiences outside of the performance review. But if you come across as being a very negative, awful communicator in the performance review, all the work you've done the first 2 quarters have just gone out the window. Because you're going to leave a bad experience and a bad memory. And, people won't remember your words, but they will definitely remember how you made them feel.
1,000%.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a manager too, come prepared. How many of us have sat in, for a performance with our managers and said, let's see what you've done here. I see you did a self-assessment. Let me just give me a minute to walk through this. Obviously, they haven't done any work at all to prepare for, their meeting with you. And it's just like, oh, geez, you can't even give me, half an hour prep time to be prepared to have the discussion with me. So, I mean, that doesn't sit well either with the team members. Yeah, as a manager, you have responsibility as well to be prepared.
Yeah, and don't be the manager that says, you book time with me for your performance review.
Oh,
I don't like that. I don't like that. It ties back to you're responsible for your own career development. Well, okay. Yes, I am as an individual, and I know we'll cover this in a future session. But as a manager, I also need to care that I'm doing my job, because at the end of the year, or at the end of that timeline, whatever it is that we have to allocate performance reviews and ratings, and that feeds into people's, salaries and bonuses and all that stuff. I have to give a number. So
Yeah.
I have accountability in that, and I need to recognize my own accountability. It's not okay to say my schedule's too full. You figure it out.
You're right.
That's the worst thing.
Yeah. So divas, we've all been in that position where we've had to provide feedback, give performance review feedback, and help to manage our team members. From our discussion here, what have we come up with lately?
What are our top learnings?
Top learnings.
I will say early intervention. Address
Okay.
performance issues as soon as they arise.
I think for me, it's a couple things. One, performance is happening all year round. So you should be evaluating and having the conversation all year round, not just the point of time of a review season. So that's one. The two is the emphasis on conversation. Have it be two-way, be open just as much as you're expecting the individual to be open to feedback. And then I think the third, kind of top takeaway here is, as a manager, you're doing your job by delivering a performance review. You can care about people. You can passionately write performance reviews and want to see people grow and all of that. But someone's reaction is not a representation of you. It's how they're internalizing something. And so just go forward with confidence when you're giving your performance reviews, and if there are negative reactions, try your hardest not to take it personally.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the consistency. I mean, if you want your teammates to take it seriously, you have to take it seriously and put time in your calendar for it and actually complete it. Stick to a schedule and make sure that they know that what the expectations are. And then, quite honestly, be prepared as a manager. As I mentioned earlier, you are impacting people's lives, their livelihood. So you need to be prepared and give it the attention it deserves. Because, yeah, I'll be honest, nobody likes doing performance reviews, but we certainly like to get paid. And if we want to be able to assess, salary increases, bonuses, promotion opportunities, we need to have something to go back to that can present to senior management to say, you know what, this is a good person. This is what we need to do. This is how we can help them go forward. So those are the bigger takeaways I have from all of this.
Thanks for listening to The Coaching Divas. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and follow us on Instagram at The Coaching Divas.
Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it.
Until next time, we are
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, The Coaching Divas.
If you're going to coach, might as well coach like a diva.